Hi again, folks. Welcome into the It's Official podcast. Jeremy Plonk here from First Bet and Express Bet to take on 5 hot topics in horse racing this week. And it's one of the busier 2-week turnarounds you're going to see on the entire racing calendar. Of course, this week we're talking Triple Crown prep races like the Florida Derby and the Arkansas Derby. A week from now, we wheel back with 3 Triple Crown preps from the Wood to the Santa Anita Derby to the Bluegrass and opening week at Keeneland, and the Dubai World Cup next week as well. So there's probably not a bigger 14-day stretch on the calendar consecutively in American racing until, I don't know, maybe Saratoga later in the summer. But it's a great time to be talking racing. We hope to have our friend Jeff Siegel back here on the podcast for some good banter sometime soon. Now, let's talk about the 5 topics we've got this week because, yes, the 3-year-olds are in the spotlight, but we start things off with our Goosebump Award, and this isn't a 3-year-old. Not a 6-year-old, not a 9-year-old. It's the 10-year-old Payne winning for the 4th time in 2025 alone last Saturday at Oaklawn Park.
And then Morello, as they come down the lane, Lundberg is taking a short lead on Congrats on 50. Here comes Payne, though, and the 10-year-old Payne is rocketing by horses. Payne is drawing clear. He's 4 or 5 lengths ahead within a blink of an eye. How cool is this dude? Payne, 10 years old, lifetime win number 12. He is awesome.
The 10-year-old by Painter. The gelding stopped the clock in 109.87, one of 4 four-time winners already in 2025 across the country. He's run 48 times in his career, 22 exacta finishes, more than $800,000 earned by Payne. He's better now than he's ever been. He was claimed out of this race to David Jacobson, had been running recently for Ingrid Mason, but he's been around the block. Eric Foster had this horse, Steve Asmussen, Kyle Karamori, originally with Brad Cox way back in the day. He's won races over the course of 7 different seasons with at least 1 victory in his 8 racing seasons of his career. The Goosebump Award this week goes to Payne. He's off now to a new barn to David Jacobson. We'll see where he turns up next. Now let's talk about another older horse, but not quite 10 like Payne. Sierra Leone, last year's champion 3-year-old, back for a 4-year-old go, and he had his first start of the year in the New Orleans Classic on the undercard for the Louisiana Derby. The Chad Brown trainee coming off a layoff, you think he would have been fired up and right where he needed to be. After all, he had run 3 times previously in a first race of the form cycle situation. He had won all 3 of them, including his career debut. Would he be up to the task off of the workouts? He had 6 of them leading up to this race. Let's take a look. It wasn't the comeback they expected with Sierra Leone.
They come to the top of the stretch. Then Comodino Amoide, San Siro, and Sierra Leone is last to make the top of this daunting fairground stretch where the longtime leader has been Touch Upon a Star. 3/4, 1 minute 10.78 seconds. It is the millionaire Touch Upon a Star for Tim Thornton and leads Hall of Fame by 3. Now Sierra Leone is into 3rd, past San Siro and Comodino Amoide, but past the 16th, it is Touch Upon a Star with his biggest win to date. Touch Upon a Star, the Louisiana bred winner of the New Orleans Classic. Wire to wire, Touch Upon a Star from Hall of Fame. Sierra Leone finished 3rd.
So was it good? No. Was it bad? Certainly. Was it get out of here and hang up the tack with a horse like Sierra Leone? I don't think this is the kind of effort that sends you off to the breeding shed. I think he'll get another few chances this year. But of course, you're not trying to get anywhere except Del Mar in the fall for the Breeders' Cup Classic and trying to find the best path to get there. Brown was a little behind the 8 ball in the training here. We mentioned he had 6 workouts, but there was about a 3-week gap in the workout tab in late January to early February. I don't think Sierra Leone was as tight as he should have been for this particular start. 9 furlongs first time off the bench is not an easy distance to come back at. 124 pounds. He was giving weight to a lot of the field in here as well. That's a pretty tough task. The winner, Touch Upon a Star, the Louisiana breds won 15 of 21 lifetime. He's a win machine, and he almost wired last year's New Orleans Classic, led all the way and got beat by Red Route 1 at the wire. So Touch Upon a Star, a legitimate winner of the New Orleans Classic, but certainly the performance on the comeback from Sierra Leone leaves a little bit of a flat feeling, no question about that. He's going to have to get much better to take on the best competition in the country later in the year. But I think this is a starting point for him. Obviously, not an ends to a means. We all know that. That's not saying anything remarkable, but I don't think this is a pull the plug kind of performance. I think he'll be okay. He was, 4 for 10 lifetime after this race. So he's lost 6 times. He's won 4. This is kind of Sierra Leone, right? I mean, we remember he won the Breeders' Cup Classic, and that got him over the top to win the 3-year-old championship. But he lost a lot of races last year, a lot of seconds and thirds on the docket, more of those than wins. So if things don't go exactly right for him in this particular race, the speed held, then he's not just a tapping kind of putt horse. At 30 cents on the dollar, though, it feels that way, and it feels like he should have blown this field out in the New Orleans Classic. He did not. He's got to get better. Where might he end up? Stephen Foster at Churchill in June, the Saratoga races in the summer. You could go out to Del Mar for the Pacific Classic, where he won the Breeders' Cup Classic last year, the Breeders' Cup back at Del Mar again. So maybe Sierra Leone's got something like that with the Stephen Foster Pacific Classic. All the races in New York, of course, and Saratoga with the big races, the Whitney, the Woodward, those kind of races like that, it would seem to be in his schedule. Sierra Leone, no, he's got to get better than that. Third, beaten 4.5 lengths. They came home the final 3 furlongs in the race in 37-32. It's tough to catch a front runner who does that. He really didn't give much chance, but the margin got bigger from the last half mile of the race. Sierra Leone actually lost a length and a half on Touch Upon a Star, maybe too close to the pace in this particular spot. We'll see. Fresh horses sometimes do get up a little bit more into the pace than when you're farther into the form cycle. But again, Sierra Leone is a horse who has run well fresh in the past, but he did not run well. He's got to get much, much better. Certainly the disappointment. We go from the Goosebump Award to the biggest disappointment of the week, that being Sierra Leone. Good, bad, or get out? Definitely not good. Not time to get out, but it was certainly, I think, in the bad category for him. Now, let's go to our third topic this week on It's Official. Steve Asmussen and Brad Cox landed some counter punches last week on the Triple Crown Trail. It was Steve Asmussen with Tiz-tastic winning in New Orleans for the Louisiana Derby, but it wasn't the horse you expected him to win the race with. He had the winner of the Risen Star Stakes by 9 lengths Magnitude. That was supposed to be his big 3-year-old. Tiz-tastic, kind of a plan B. He goes to New Orleans. He gets the victory there. We'll talk more about his race. And for Brad Cox, he also landed plan B for him. The counterpunch for him was after so many defeats on the Triple Crown Trail this year, we knew he lost Disco Time as winner of the Lecomte. We haven't seen that one back since. But he lost the Holy Bull, the Southwest, and the Louisiana Derby with favorites. Brad Cox got back on the board in the Jeff Ruby with a horse coming off a low buyer and a maiden win at Turfway Park and Final Gambit. Let's go back and look at the races from last weekend on the Triple Crown Trail, starting with the Louisiana Derby. It was a race where there was no Magnitude, there was no Disco Time, so the winners of the Risen Star and the Lecomte were out. The race was fishing for a new face. Tiz-tastic happened to be it.
As these two battle to the top of the stretch, Chunk of Gold is right there. Tiz-tastic. Furio has dropped back. Hypnus and on the far outside, Vassimo. As they straighten away, Instant Replay is moving from out of the backfield, but it's Built. And Built has taken the lead here for Jose Ortiz. It's Built in front. John Hancock has given way. Right there is Chunk of Gold between horses. And on the outside, Tiz-tastic. As they come past the 16th with Joel Rosario. It's Tiz-tastic now pulling clear from Chunk of Gold. Instant Replay, Tiz-tastic on top of the Louisiana Derby. Tiz-tastic won by just over 2 from Chunk of Gold. Instant Replay third, and John Hancock finished fourth.
Now, when you have a rallying winner of a race, you feel like they're finishing up strong, but the final 3/16 in this race at 1 mile and 3/16, 1973, extremely slow. In fact, in the 6 years they've run this race at 1 mile and 3/16, that was the slowest final come home time in the Louisiana Derby by almost a full second. So they did not finish up well. Tiz-tastic was just best of a tired group in here. The splits set by John Hancock were just way too fast. 46 and change under Flavian Pratt. They never got a breather down the backstretch. Some long shots that tried to go with John Hancock, they paid the price in there. Furio and Yinzer ended up last and next to last, both beaten big, 36 and 51 lengths between the two of them. So they paid the price. I think John Hancock also paid the price. The horse who had won the Sam F. Davis Stakes, battling on the front end. He went right to the front in this race and was aggressively ridden by Pratt, but never got a breather. Ended up fourth in here and probably should have got beaten farther than he did, but they just didn't come home that fast. Fourth beaten 6 1/4 takes John Hancock likely off the Triple Crown Trail. Can't imagine you want to go on with him farther in here. Built took a chance and a run at John Hancock in the upper stretch, as you saw, and then he just hit a wall. For Built, it's kind of all been, going the wrong way of late, I think. Who's not in the right direction. And the way he just stopped over the final eighth of a mile on there, Built's got points to compete in the Kentucky Derby, but I can't imagine you want to go on with him to go a mile and a quarter in a 20-horse field with so much speed that would probably be in there. So Built and John Hancock certainly take a big step back in here. As for the top two, Tistastic and Chunk of Gold, both now have plenty of points to play in the Kentucky Derby. Tistastic's a horse that, if you've been following my Countdown to the Crown series, I've been writing all year. I thought the horse needed blinkers. He's run spotty in his races. He was able to make a nice, smooth inside slingshot move and perfect trip run here without any blinkers. So maybe the light bulb's just coming on. I think he might have just caught the right pace setup and the right kind of field in here, though. Joel Rosario with a well-timed, well-guided ride in here. Tistastic will go on to the Kentucky Derby. It's one of those late runners for Steve Asmussen. You've seen those over the years, and we'll see if one of them might be able to land on the board. But Asmussen's still looking for his first Kentucky Derby after all these years. Magnitude seemed like the one, maybe after the Risen Star winning that by more than 9. Now he's got to go on with Tistastic. I don't think he's got as strong a hand to play with this one, but on to the Kentucky Derby with Tistastic. As for Chunk of Gold, the runner-up, the Turfway-based runners had a good winter in New Orleans for Ethan West. He earned his way to the Kentucky Derby, but he was just okay in this particular race with no major excuses. Chunk of Gold got a good trip in here and came up second best. He'll go to Kentucky as one of the long shots for the Kentucky Derby. He's earned the spot there to compete. He's never really run a bad race this year in his efforts, so he's earned the right to be there. But I don't see this year's Louisiana Derby as a major threat and factor as we move on to the Kentucky Derby. It has been in recent years, obviously. Louisiana Derby, the last 4 years, has had a superfecta finisher, at least one in the Kentucky Derby, 4 straight years. I think they'll be hard-pressed to put a horse in the superfecta out of this group this year. But let's see how the horses train between now and Louisville. But the come-home time, not impressive in here. Kind of a pace and race shape aided victory, I think, in here with Tistastic and Chunk of Gold. Instant replay, closed from dead last to finish third in here, and really didn't have a whole lot on resume for Brad Cox coming into the race. Again, I think he may have just kind of benefited from the race shape in here. So we'll see. Louisiana Derby in the books. I don't think it's as strong as it has been in some of the more recent years, but Tistastic got the crown on Saturday at the Fairgrounds. Now to the Jeff Ruby Stakes, and a horse that we liked a bit in our Countdown to the Crown write-up. Picked him second in here, and I'm kicking myself because I'm a little bit of a handicapping slump, so I'll just be honest with that. And as we talk here about the Jeff Ruby Stakes, when you're in a handicapping slump, sometimes you tighten up a little bit and you settle for shorter prices, thinking like, I'm not seeing the ball as well. Final Gambit at 15-1 plus in here, almost, a little over 15-1 versus the favorite in the spot here, who was sent off at 9-5 in Poster. Those were my top two choices in the race. I took Poster. I think Poster is a better horse coming into the race, but Final Gambit had shown a lot on video, just coming home extremely fast in a maiden special weight for Brad Cox in the previous start. The buyer speed figure was very low. All 3 buyers were low for the horse. Therefore, he didn't get bet, even though it was top local rider Luan Machado. It was Brad Cox, a Juddmonte runner, but 3.5 lengths win for Final Gambit, and he looked as good coming home in this race as he did in his prior. Let's go back to the Jeff Ruby at Turfway.
Flying Mohawk begins to gear up. He's hitting his best stride. Curvino's under a drive. They're going to Final Gambit, and he's not joking. California Burrito has come away with the lead at the top of the lane in the Jeff Ruby, and Jacoso is chasing after him, and Maximum Promise is hitting his stride. It's California Burrito, Jacoso. Here comes Final Gambit to the far outside, rolling home like a good thing. Check out Final Gambit and Luan Machado. They win the Jeff Ruby Stakes going away.
So while we talked about them coming home slow in the Louisiana Derby, this one came home exceptionally fast. 37-1 over the final 3 furlongs of the Jeff Ruby for the overall fractions. But this horse, Final Gambit, made up more than 7 lengths during that time, which means he came home in the high 35s. I mean, an exceptionally fast come-home time in here for Flying Gambit. He's by not this time, a very versatile stallion, can certainly get a runner on dirt. We haven't seen Final Gambit anywhere but Turfway, so we haven't seen him on anything but Zapita. How he'll handle the dirt, we're going to have to watch him train going into the Kentucky Derby. But one problem with Final Gambit is he's a little sloppy getting out of the gate here, breaking inward and getting in a tangle with some other horses. Not the first time he's done that. you can kind of get away with that and drop back to last in a race on the synthetic with a fairly fast pace, 47-4. In the Kentucky Derby, breaking the way he has in a couple of starts will get you absolutely eliminated and crushed, and it's not a good spot at all if you're a horse who has trouble getting out of the gate cleanly. So Final Gambit, he's going to have to clean it up at the gate, but he absolutely is a top-notch closer. Runner-up in here, Flying Mohawk, a turf runner who may or may not move on to the Kentucky Derby. They both have enough points. I think you'll definitely see Flying Gambit pointed towards the Kentucky Derby in here for Juddmonte and company, but I don't think we're necessarily set that Flying Mohawk and trainer Whit Beckman, who got to the Kentucky Derby last year with Honor Marie, I don't think he's dead set on running this horse on the dirt going to the Kentucky Derby for Flying Mohawk. Maybe a horse who would run in the American turf on the grass for 3-year-olds Derby weekend. We'll see, though. There's only one Kentucky Derby, and if you got enough points to play, I'll never argue with anybody who wants to take a shot to run for the Roses. But Flying Gambit, Final Gambit, who was flying, and Flying Mohawk, they rallied from 12th and 11th in the 12-horse field. This is another race where it just completely turned upside down, very similar to what we saw in the Louisiana Derby. These were meltdown scenarios. Look, if you don't have quality speed horses, this is what can happen when you start to get these longer distances, a mile and an eighth, a mile and 3/16. They just kind of flip, what starts off fast ends up in the back. What starts off slow ends up in the front at the end. But when you get quality speed horses, like we're going to see out of California, like you might see in Florida and some of the other locations around the country at Oaklawn, you don't get necessarily those flips like you do sometimes because the quality speed can hold. Kentucky Derby, that's a whole different category, and we've seen plenty of meltdown winners of the Kentucky Derby, even in recent years. Rich Strike, obviously, one who comes to mind. So it can happen in the Kentucky Derby, and in a meltdown scenario, a horse like Final Gambit, if he takes to the dirt, he has an incredible closing kick. Again, go back and watch the race in his maiden victory, and then watch this race, and you're going to see a horse just shot out of the cannon over the last quarter of a mile, eighth of a mile. So he can run late. We're going to see how Final Gambit trains on the dirt moving towards the Kentucky Derby. So Brad Cox with Plan B and a counter punch. Steve Asmussen with a counter punch. They're both headed to the Kentucky Derby the way it looks, with winners of the Jeff Ruby and the Louisiana Derby. Now, let's go on our Triple Crown tracker next up and talk about a few races coming up this weekend in the 3-year-old ranks. We're also going to look at some workouts, and we're going to look overseas for a Friday night race in Japan. It's from the Fukurio Stakes from Nakayama Racecourse, Friday night in Japan. That's going to be race number 10, 2:10 a.m. Eastern will be the post time from Nakayama on Friday night into Saturday morning. So be sure to check that one out, because we've got Luxor Cafe running in that race. He's a half-brother to Regal Glory and a full brother to Cafe Pharaoh, who ran really big in Japan a couple years back. He's the winner of the Hyacinth Stakes, and he's the best horse from Japan right now, perhaps headed towards the Kentucky Derby. He's got one more step to get there. Let's take a look at Luxor Cafe last time out in the Hyacinth.
A quarter Uzel, Don in the Mood makes a line of 4. This will set up beautifully for the favourite in behind them, Luxor Cafe. And looking for an out in behind them is Taisei Dorado. So the big striding Luxor Cafe, given his head by Rachel King, down the middle of the track and starts to lengthen. Starting to run on Admire Daytona, and from the back of the field, the one that blew the kick, Promise Gene, is coming on strong, but Luxor Cafe, full of running, going to be hard to knock off. Promise Gene's going to make it very interesting. Luxor Cafe stretching. Has he got enough? Yes, he has. Luxor Cafe takes it out. Promise Gene.
From Japan, late Friday night to Hallandale Beach, Florida on Saturday at Gulfstream Park for the Florida Derby. The $1 million Florida Derby's got a field of 10. Let's take a look at the entries for the Florida Derby, where the headline performers in there have to start with Sovereignty. He was a rallying winner of the Fountain of Youth Stakes in his first start of the year. It looked on paper in his workout tab that he might need a race, and even trainer Bill Mott thought he needed a race going into the spot. But Sovereignty in the last eighth of a mile jumped into the fray and jumped right past River Thames to win it. Let's go back to the Fountain of Youth and take a look at Sovereignty, the likely favorite for the Florida Derby.
Side into third, Gate to Wire finds his best stride. Burnham Square's bid is stalled as River Thames has made a clear lead. Off the turn and the stretch drive in the Fountain of Youth, and River Thames, he has the lead by 2 with his 16th to go. Sovereignty begins to get on track, but time is ticking away. River Thames almost there. Sovereignty gonna dive at him late. Here comes Sovereignty! He got him too, did Sovereignty. He went from last to first to win under Junior Alvarado for Godolphin and Bill Mott.
Now, Sovereignty will be looking for a new rider. Junior Alvarado out with a shoulder injury. So Bill Mott and the Godolphin crew shopping around this week. No word as of the recording of this podcast who they'll get to ride Sovereignty. But certainly that decision will be a big one. Not the easiest horse in the world to ride. So if you don't get Sovereignty in the right spot and get him going right at the right time, this is a race where maybe he could take a step backwards if the timing doesn't work just right for him. Sovereignty, though, if he moves forward off that Fountain of Youth, is going to be very, very tough to beat. Now, the competition in here includes Disruptor, who on the undercard back on March 1st on Fountain of Youth Day ran a hole in the win, 9 1/4 length victory in that second career start. He's a $1.1 million son of gun runner, well-bred Todd Pletcher trainee. A Disruptor with Irad Ortiz, probably stretching out from 7 furlongs to 1.125 is going to show some speed. Neo Equus along the rails certainly has got plenty of speed. He set the pace in the Fountain of Youth Stakes. He's been on the lead in 4 races in a row at some point. So Neo Equus from the inside, Disruptor. There looks to be some pace in here, obviously, to give a shot for Sovereignty. Other speed in the race could come from Tappan Street or Matticat Road. Matticat Road, a Bob Baffert trainee coming in for the Florida Derby. Change of pace there. Matticat Road was in the Rebel Stakes when running second to Cole Battle. Instead of sending him to Arkansas, they're going to Gulfstream with Matticat Road. Not a typical move for Baffert this time of year. He gets Tyler Gaffleone, one of the top local riders at Gulfstream, to ride. Matticat Road's a horse who's on this level, I think, talent-wise. He was third to Citizen Bull and Rodriguez in the Lewis. And again, a clear second in the Rebel Stakes. Not necessarily clear, but he was clear throughout the running, held for second in there with the late running Sandman closing the gap as well. But I think Matticat Road would fit well in this particular spot, as would Tappan Street. Tappan Street, I thought, ran a really good race. Second career start, he was stretching out in the Holy Bull off a sprint win at the meet at Gulfstream for Brad Cox. He made kind of a bit of a premature move, made the lead early. Burnham Square ran by him. Now, of course, Burnham Square didn't come back to hold that form very well in the Fountain of Youth Stakes, but I thought maybe that skipping the Fountain of Youth and going from the Holy Bull to the Florida Derby would have been the right move for Burnham Square. So I do think it's the right move for Tappan Street as well. So Brad Cox brings this one in fresh. Luis Saez rides. Doesn't need the lead, but I don't think he's going to be super far out of it. Tappan Street in here. There's plenty of pace. So if Sovereignty can get going like he did last time out in the Fountain of Youth, he's going to be hard to keep away from in the stretch. I mean, he's going to be hard to deny in the stretch. He's going to be making a run for sure. We'll have our handicapping of the Florida Derby and the Arkansas Derby and all the big races coming up on our Friday podcast. It's official. But Florida Derby, one of the our Friday podcast is First Call, of course. Be sure to check that out. Let's switch gears from the Florida Derby now and talk about the Arkansas Derby, grade 1 mile and an eighth. We've got a field of 9 in here. Cole Battle, of course, the winner of the Smarty Jones and the Rebel Stakes. He's won 4 straight stakes races, from the Jean Lafitte at Delta Downs to the Springboard Mile at Remington Park to the 2 races at Oaklawn. He goes for 5 in a row for 79-year-old trainer Lonnie Briley, who's on the ride of his life with this horse of a lifetime. Cole Battle, one of the horses absolutely to beat in the Arkansas Derby this year. But the favorite in the morning line is Cornucopian, just a second-time starter, coming off a win February 23rd. That was on the Rebel Stakes undercard, where he ran a hole in the win, 109 flat for 6 furlongs under Irad Ortiz that day. Irad is staying in Florida to ride. That gives John Velasquez the mount on Cornucopian, teaming back up with Bob Baffert. Of course, they team with Medina Spirit and other big ones over the years. So Johnny V riding for Bob Baffert, Cornucopian, the outside post draw. Cole Battle just to his inside. Certainly more early speed expected from Cornucopian. He's going to try to cross over the face of Cole Battle and those to his inside. He'll get the Speed King, who also has speed in here. Speed King, winner of the Southwest Stakes in wire-to-wire fashion. He did not fire at all in the Rebel when he didn't get near the front. Expect him to be closer to the front in here under Rafael Bejarano. So the pace players in here look like Speed King and Cornucopian. Not a ton of speed to set up for the closers in the Arkansas Derby on first glance, but it should come down to a couple of those main players in there. You would think that Cole Battle and Cornucopian vie for favoritism. Sandman will get bet in here as well. He was bet to favoritism when third in the Rebel at 5-2. Everybody fell in love with that trouble line in the Southwest when he had a disastrous start and a big finish. I don't think he followed it up quite with the effort people thought in the Rebel Stakes when he was just an okay third in there. We'll see if he can improve. Maybe you get a little bit better price this time. He'll go higher than 5-2 for sure, because Cornucopian is going to get bet 7-5 in the morning line, and he'll be hammered. Now you say, look, you're coming out of 6 furlong sprint race, and now you're going to go 1 mile and an eighth in the Grade 1 Arkansas Derby. That's impossible. Bob Baffert did it a few years back with Taba, back when Baffert was under suspension. So Taba actually ran in Tim Yakteen's name for the Santa Anita Derby, but the debut was for Baffert. The training was all Baffert. Turned over to Yakteen a week or so before the Santa Anita Derby, and that runner Taba went on to win the Santa Anita Derby in just a second start with a very similar looking form. This horse is extremely talented. Cornucopian training extremely well. He will be a handful if he can negotiate the distance in the Arkansas Derby. Now let's talk about some morning workouts with the Baffert camp. We talked about Cornucopian, and last week when he worked with Barnes, we thought that he outworked Barnes a week ago. Well, Barnes was back on the workout tab this past week, and he got outworked again by Rodriguez, his stablemate. As we take a look in the dark, Bruce Springsteen would be happy dancing in the dark here, because this was not what you want to see if you're a fan of Barnes. Now, I know the official clockers gave 5/8 of a mile to Barnes, and Rodriguez worked 6 furlongs out to the 8th pole, but he was outworked to the finish line. He was pulling away from him late, and that's not the kind of move that you make with a star horse with Barnes. You wouldn't work your star 5/8 of a mile, another horse 3/4, and let him just kind of get his heart pulled out as the other horse draws away from him. That's what you do with a lesser horse, kind of a workmate, a setup, a tomato can if you want. A Barnes $3.2 million horse is nobody's tomato can. So he's not going right now. He's not going as well as he had prior. Interesting going back and looking at the history of the workouts with Barnes. He started going bad in his most recent work, and now the work 2 back, and now this most recent work. Those were the only 2 works in the dark. I mean, prior to that, everything was kind of in the broad daylight. If this horse was 1 or 2 in everybody's Kentucky Derby thought process after winning the San Vicente, running a good second to Journalism in the San Felipe Stakes, I don't think he's going right now, and I'm not sure where they're going to end up with him as Baffert separates his charges. Barnes could stay west for the Santa Anita Derby, where we also have the 2-year-old champion expected there. So, Citizen Bull. I don't think you'd want to run him against Citizen Bull. Rodriguez, maybe a horse you keep for the Santa Anita Derby home. Baffert could go on the road for the Wood Memorial or the Bluegrass Stakes. Those would be the main options left on the calendar where you might see his horses running next week outside of running in the Santa Anita Derby. But I don't think things are going well for Barnes right now. As for the horse who beat him last time, though, in the San Felipe, Journalism, he's my number 1 ranked contender for the Kentucky Derby. He has been since the first week of January when we started the countdown to the Crown Scouting Report for the 20th season. And Journalism remains absolutely on edge. Here's a workout he had with Endlessly, last year's Kentucky Derby starter, who won through the synthetic run for trainer Michael McCarthy. McCarthy doesn't have many horses in his barn on dirt that you would want to work with Journalism, because he's probably just stronger than anything he has in his barn. And here, Endlessly was no match as well. Journalism really finishing up strong in here. Like the gallop out, he is absolutely the horse to beat as we head towards the Santa Anita Derby. Citizen Bull and Journalism should be a great matchup over 1 mile and an eighth. Given the distance and the way they finish up, you would think Journalism might have the edge in that spot over Citizen Bull, but he continues to train well. So while we don't like the work for Barnes of late, certainly Journalism is working well. And I did get the chance to see Citizen Bull a few times on video recently. He is training exceptionally well. So it's not all bad for the Baffert camp right now. Certainly Cornucopian is training very well. Rodriguez training well. Citizen Bull training well. He's got a lot of hands still to play on the Kentucky Derby Trail. But I won't be shocked if Barnes isn't one of them by the time we get to the first Saturday in May. That's a wrap for our Triple Crown Tracker. Let's go to our 5th and final topic this week on the It's Official podcast. We always finish things up with our stars of tomorrow. Brad Cox has already been in the spotlight once on this show with his winner, Final Gambit, in the Jeff Ruby. Well, how about Serendipity? This is a 3-year-old filly making her career debut on the turf at Gulfstream Park. This was on Sunday, going 1 mile and a 16th. The Street Sense filly, awesome on the front end, and she's our star of tomorrow.
47-2 for a half-mile speed, and the leader is still Serendipity by half a length. Texas Holiday second, Oradoro a driven third, Princess Attitude racing together with No Sleep Till Brooklyn. Trying to wind up from the back, Basilia, and on her outside, Sweet Mackenzie. Tamely dropping away was the Gale, then Awesome Mackenzie, nothing from the inside, and Sail Away, and they're on their way home. Speaking of sailing away, Serendipity tries to go the distance here. Joelle Rosario shakes her up for the drive, and she's got plenty here. Serendipity on the board at 5-1 will never face a serious threat en route to a second race victory. Serendipity is in front. Basilia is up for second. No Sleep Till Brooklyn third.
After a 47-2 half, came home 23-53 and 5.79 the last 16th. Strong closing fractions there for a front runner on the grass. Serendipity, one to watch, this week's star of tomorrow. Let's recap our topics this week on It's Official. The Goosebump Award went to the 10-year-old Payne, winning for the fourth straight time. He's as good as ever at the ripe old age of 10 and claimed out of that race the 10-year-old Goosebump Award, Payne. Now, Sierra Leone, good, bad, or get out. We had to decide what to do with him after the New Orleans Classic. We just said circle the bad part of it on the third place effort. He's got to get better moving forward. Sierra Leone, disappointing in the New Orleans Classic when running third at 30 cents on the dollar and actually losing ground over the last half mile to touch upon a star. Steve Asmussen and Brad Cox landed counter punches on the Triple Crown Trail. They had horses who won earlier in their season at fairgrounds out of commission, but they won the big races last weekend nonetheless. Asmussen with Magnitude Out won the Louisiana Derby with Tiztastic, and Brad Cox with Disco Time Out, and after losing a couple big races as the favorite, pulled the long shot $30 upset winner of the Jeff Ruby, that one with Final Gambit. And then the Triple Crown Tracker, we previewed the Arkansas Derby and the Florida Derby, the Fukurio Stakes in Japan, and looked at Luxor Cafe in that one. Took a look at the workouts of Barnes and Journalism, and talked about Citizen Bull and his matchup with Journalism coming up in the Santa Anita Derby. And our star of tomorrow, Serendipity, 3-year-old filly for trainer Brad Cox by Street Sense. Impressive front-running winner on the turf. Maybe we'll see her in Keeneland in a grass stakes race coming up sometime soon. Those 5 topics are now official because Jeff Siegel and I said so. That's the way we play the game, and I'll be back next week with 5 more hot topics to put on the board. Between now and then, though, get handicapping. Entries are already out, as we showed you, for the Arkansas Derby and for the Florida Derby Day cards. A big weekend of racing coming up. I'll be back on Friday with a handicapper to take a look. Scott Shapiro expected to be with us on Friday to look at the weekend stakes races. We hope to have Jeff back with us in the saddle very soon. On behalf of everybody with First Bet and Express Bet, I'm Jeremy Plonk.